Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. This is video number 2 of how to study the Bible. If you haven't seen video number 1, stop this video, go back and watch video number 1 because steps 1 and 2 are in video number 1. Here in video 2 are steps 3 and 4. Video number 3 will have steps 5 and 6. So here's what we're talking about. Anyone can study any passage from any book in the Bible. This is my firm belief. I've been teaching this at the Bible University level, at the Bible Institute level, and at the church level, and everybody I've taught this method to, they've learned it. They're able to do this. This is a method that anyone can use because I firmly believe that anyone can study any passage from any book in the Bible. The results that we're going to see from this class or from these videos is, number 1, you'll have a study method for understanding the Bible's teachings. You'll have some tools and a method so that when you go to study any passage in the Bible, you'll have a method to be able to do that and to understand the teachings of the Bible. Not only that, you will not have to depend on others for your spiritual nourishment. Now, I'm not saying that you can't stop going to church, you can't stop going to small group or Sunday school, but we can't depend on other people and on those moments to provide our spiritual nourishment. We need to become self-feeders. That's something very important in our growth, our maturity, in our walk in Christ. And with this method, you won't have to depend on others for your spiritual nourishment. You still need others. It's still good to grow with other people. Well, we're much better as we're growing together. But with this method, you won't have to depend always on others. And finally, this is such an exciting part of doing Bible study and teaching this, is that you will be able to share what you learn with other people. That's a fantastic benefit because you may encounter people who are going through a difficulty, and because you did a Bible study, you may have the precise word that they need to hear to get them through their struggle. So I'm teaching this method step by step using the book of James as an example. We're looking at a passage from the book of James as an example. What we've seen so far, step 1, read the entire book from start to finish, and step 2, divide the book into passages. Again, if you haven't seen video number 1, go back and watch that one because that's where these 2 steps are developed. But here's what we've done so far. We've read the entire book of James, and then we've taken the book of James and we've divided the book of James into passages. And what we said a passage is a group of verses that develop one main idea, one big idea. That's a passage. And in this case, we're looking at James chapter 1, verses 19 through 27 as the passage that we're using as an example in these videos. Now, I use these little green arrows in my Bible to indicate to me where a passage starts and where a passage ends. You don't have to use green arrows, but use something to indicate to you where's the start and where's the end of a passage. Going on, step number 3. We want to divide the passage into paragraphs. Now notice what we're doing. We've got the entire book of James. We've divided the book of James into passages, smaller groups of verses where one main idea is developed. Now what we want to do is take those passages and divide them even further into paragraphs or smaller units, smaller sections where sub-ideas are developed. So this is what this looks like. We've got the passage here, James 1, 19 through 27, but then notice how I've divided the passage into smaller chunks, smaller paragraphs. The first paragraph, James 1, 19 through 21. The second paragraph, James 1, 22 through 25, and then the third paragraph is James 1, verses 26 and 27. These are smaller sections or smaller thought units within the entire passage. And here's what we're doing. What we're saying is this one passage develops one main idea, one big idea. But the way it does it is by teaching us smaller ideas or smaller teachings within that. And these smaller ideas, they help develop the main idea of the entire passage. So that's step number 3. And this is what I do. You'll see at the end of that paragraph over there, I have this little blue bracket. That indicates to me that that's the end of a paragraph. That's where that ends. So the idea is that this is one smaller thought unit within the entire passage. At the end of this section right here, I have another small blue bracket that indicates to me that is the end of another paragraph. So paragraph 1, paragraph 2. At the end over here, I don't have a blue bracket because since that's the end of the passage, well, I know that's also the end of a paragraph. So notice what we have, one passage, the whole thing, divided into 3 paragraphs. It won't always be 3 paragraphs. It depends on the length of the passage. It also depends on how the author decides to develop the main idea within that passage. But that's step number 3. divide the passage into paragraphs. Step 4, identify the main idea of each paragraph. Now, this is what we're looking to do. We're going to look at each paragraph individually. And we're going to take this first paragraph, for example. And I'm just going to read this paragraph over and over. And I'm going to try to identify as best I can what is the main idea of this paragraph, and just this paragraph. What's the main idea of this paragraph? And so what I've determined for myself is that the main idea of this paragraph is that first part of verse 21. Therefore, get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent. Now, notice what I did. I don't necessarily have to choose an entire verse from start to finish of the verse for that to be the main idea for that paragraph. I don't have to choose the entire verse. But what I have done is that I selected words that are in sequence. This is what I mean. I didn't choose a word from up here and then another word from here and another word from here and say that's the main idea of the paragraph. No. I selected a coherent thought, a coherent phrase that in my opinion identifies or gives expression to the main idea of this paragraph. And what's very important here is that, notice, I didn't paraphrase, I didn't put it in my own words. I simply identified the main idea of this paragraph using only the words of the biblical text. That's what we want to do at this stage of our study. Use only the words of the biblical text to identify the main idea of each paragraph. So if somebody were to ask me, Mario, what's the main idea of James chapter 1 verses 19 through 21? This is how I would respond, and I highlight that in blue. It means something to me that I highlighted in blue. It means that that's the main idea of that paragraph. We move on to the second paragraph of this passage, James 1, 22 through 25. I'm going to read that several times over, get a good feel for it, and then I'm going to identify what is the main idea of this paragraph using only the words of the biblical text. Now, you can pause the video right here and do that exercise right now, but here's what I've selected as the main idea for this paragraph. It's up at the beginning of verse 22, and in this case, it happens to be all of verse 22. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. So if someone were to ask me, Mario, what's the main idea, the one big idea of this paragraph, that's what I would identify as the main idea of this paragraph. We've got one more paragraph within this passage, James 1, 26 and 27. Read that over and over, get a good feel for it, and then I have to make a decision. What is the main idea of this paragraph right here? In my opinion, it's the first part of verse 27. I apologize for that. Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this. That for me is the main idea of this paragraph. Again, if someone were to ask me, Mario, what is James chapter 1 verses 26 and 27 about? This is what I would point to this using only the words of the biblical text. I've identified a phrase or a sentence or a section that identifies to me what this paragraph is talking about. So if we zoom back out, we see that we have the entire passage, right, divided into 3 paragraphs. And now we've got a bit more information about what the big idea of our paragraph is, of our passage is, because we've identified the main idea for each paragraph. And these 3 main ideas, what they're going to do is that they're going to come together and they're going to help us identify what the main idea for the entire passage is. So this is step number 4 right here. We're going to identify the main idea for each paragraph in the passage. So let's review. Step number 1, read the entire book from start to finish. Step number 2, divide the book into passages. That's in video number 1. Step number 3, divide the passage into paragraphs. Step number 4, identify the main idea of each paragraph. So there it is. We've got 4 steps down already, 2 more to go. Stay tuned, keep going on. Video number 3, so we can cover steps 5 and 6 on how to study the Bible.